Well, good evening, everyone. A couple of weeks ago when Behruz called me or wrote me and said, what are you going to talk about in 2 weeks' time? I sat there and was totally blank, because I have been giving talks once a month for now a year. And every time has been a new topic, and because I get very bored with myself, so I cannot repeat. And so I sat there and said, what am I going to talk? And I said, decisions. And then I said, of course, that's the talk. So that's the way this topic came up. I was stuck and had to make a decision. And decided to share with you some thoughts about decision making. Because we all, in our lives, we constantly make decisions. But to be honest with you, until 1991, I had not thought about decision making in a systematic manner. In other words, I hadn't asked myself, how do we make decisions? Why we make decisions? Why this decision and not that decision? And what is the consequences of not knowing how we make decisions? I hadn't asked myself these questions. So it happened that in 1991, I was invited to go to an international conference on education in Leningrad. In that year, Leningrad was changing its name to St. Petersburg again. And they had asked me to give a talk and also to hold a workshop on a special type of decision-making called consultation. How to consult. Consultation, of course, is a group decision-making process. So they have two dimensions here. One is a personal decision-making, and the other one is a group decision-making. Tonight, I think I will be able only to focus on the personal decision-making process. Hopefully, sometimes in future, we talk about the group decision-making, which is consultation. So they asked me to talk about consultation, which was group decision-making. And I began to think about the whole dynamics and processes of decision-making. And became very preoccupied with it. For months, it was in the back of my head. How do we make decisions? What are the parameters of decision making? How come this decision and not that decision? And just before going to Leningrad, I was attending the International Baha'i Convention at Haifa, Israel, and I was walking by in the beautiful gardens of Baha'i international holy places. In Bahji, was a place called Bahji. Baha'is here know where I'm talking about. And I was reflecting and thinking, and suddenly an idea came to my mind. Suddenly, I began to see an opening in trying to understand decision making. How do we make decisions? Decision making is probably the most fundamental human activity because it shapes every aspect of our lives. If you reflect on it, if you think about it, you will see that you constantly make decisions. And decisions are made at several levels. We make decisions at an intellectual level. We think, we talk with ourselves, we rationalize things, we try to understand things, we think about decisions that we are going to make. Also, our decisions are affected deeply by our feelings. We have, every time that we make a decision, not only we have certain thoughts, but also we have definite feelings about those things that we want to do and the decisions that we want to. And also, we feel comfortable about our decisions if these decisions that we are making, not only intellectually we feel comfortable with them, and emotionally we feel comfortable with them, we also have to feel comfortable with our decisions about their outcome. In other words, we cannot make a decision and be comfortable with it if the outcome of it is negative. You see? So every decision has three components. And those three components, I try to think to myself how to remember the three components of decision making. And I came up with three words that I think always apply to our decision-making processes. Okay? Think about the major decisions that you have made in life. Okay? Think about them. And think about the ways that you also make decisions. And you will see that one of the first things that shape our decisions is the understanding that we have about life and our place in life. Or, in other words, we all have an idea, an understanding, a worldview about what is this life all about who we are, what is our place in this universe, okay? And this combination of these things is called our perspective on life. P number one, perspective. Every decision that is made through our worldview, our mindset, our perspective. For example, if I am a fearful person, okay, and I see the world as a dangerous place, and I see people as being dangerous, then decisions that I make in life are going to be as such that would isolate me from other people, that I would avoid as much as possible other people. I, make sure that I'm always have my back against the wall so that nobody can stab me from behind. I become suspicious. I wonder when people say, "How are you?" I say, "I wonder what he means." you know, why he asked that, why this person smiled at me. If I'm fearful and suspicious, that's the decisions that I make are going to be those that are going to very much limit my life. And I would live a very limited life. On the other hand, on the extreme side, if I am a very careless person with a lot of bravado and risk-taking and saying that, I can do anything I want in this world and this and that and that and that, I am a free person and, I would make decisions that are many times backfiring and giving difficulties and so forth. And then we are in between. So there are extremes and the in between. So all of this depends on the worldview or perspective that we have. And we usually have one of the three major categories of mindset worldview, you see, if we want to think about the ways that people think. One worldview, which has been the most ancient worldview, the most ancient perspective on life, and it still is the most common. We call it a worldview based on power. In other words, many people think that this world is a dangerous place. And in a dangerous, difficult place, the most important thing that you have to have is power. And therefore, in your relationship with people, you always have to try to either put yourself in a position of power, so you're the leader, you can control, or on the side of the leader, so that the powerful person would help you and support you, and you obey the leader, and the leader then, for the price of obedience, protects you. You see, this is called the authoritarian worldview, authoritarian mindset, authoritarian dictatorial mindset. Authoritarian dictatorial mindset means that we look at this world to be a frightening, dangerous place that is filled with a lot of strangers. Is us versus other people. And we have to protect ourselves. And in order to protect ourselves, we have to have power. And in order to have power, then we make certain kinds of decisions. Now, if you think about it, you will see individually we do that. Also, you see in organizations, people do that. In communities, people, in schools, kids do that. In governments, constantly we see this is happening. So power-based decision-making is one of the oldest types of decision-making. Okay? And it is this a kind of decision-making that has, over the centuries, has been used by men controlling women, by the majority controlling the minority, by the rich controlling the poor, by the people in position of certain knowledge, religious or academic, controlling others. This has been used throughout history and has caused enormous heartache for humanity. Enormous problems have come because of this type of decision making by political leaders, by religious leaders, by leaders of society, by people with a power and position in interpersonal relationships and everything. So that's one major category of what we call world view or perspective on world. Okay, P number one. Another kind of worldview is a worldview that developed in rebellion and in response to the power-based worldview. And that was when people finally said, we cannot take it any longer. That we cannot accept people controlling us. That we cannot accept leaders controlling us, men controlling women, rich controlling poor, whatever, okay? So there was a rebellion. Humanity came of adolescent age. And we said, well, I'm not going to take it any longer, okay? And this happens in the families. Children reach adolescent age and say, if the parents have been authoritarian, to their surprise, suddenly their 14-year-old or 12-year-old is going to give them absolute difficult time because he now has some power or she has some power and is going to use that power to give you real rough time, okay? So this happens all the time. So humanity about 200 years ago or so began to enter a new phase, a phase in which power-based decisions were not any longer accepted. And we had enormous developments taking place in the world. People began to reject religion. People began to reject the leadership of the governments. The empires began to collapse. The colonial systems began to collapse. The anti-slavery movements began to happen. The women's movement began to happen. All of these things that began to happen, the workers against the owners, and all of these were rebellion of humanity against this power-based way of decision-making. Okay? And we entered a new era. And the new era says that this world, instead of saying this world was dangerous, people say, well, this world is a jungle. And what is the law of jungle? Survival of the fittest. We are in a survival of the fittest. So what we are going to do with each other, we are going to compete. We are going to make competition as a virtue. We are going to compete, and what is the purpose of our life? Is to win. We are going to get power. We are going to get engaged in power struggle. Men against women, white against black, this religion against that religion, this government against that government, communism against capitalism, you name it. Suddenly the world became a jungle. And humanity began to make decisions a la animals in the jungle. And one of the characteristics of jungle is that nobody really is truly powerful. You know, for example, you have a big elephant, okay? The elephant is powerful. A little rat can go and sit on the back of elephant and start chewing on the back, and elephant cannot do anything about it. It's a little tiny rat sitting there, chewing, you know, because the nature of power changes. Still, relationships are based on power, and decisions are made on the condition of power. But it is now, power is distributed differently, and there is a power struggle taking place. And some people fight actively, and some people fight passively. You know, have you been, you know, dealing with people who just simply drive you up the wall by just being passive, not doing anything? You know, just, you know. I remember when I was in medical school. No, it was high school. In high school, I had two friends who were roommates. And one day came and I saw one of them was totally black all over. You know. So what happened? He said, well, he beat me up. I turned to him and said, why are you beating me up? He said, oh, he has been just making me so uncomfortable. I said, why? He said, he has this habit of sitting there and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. I eat fast and he eats so slow. And that becomes totally, I feel guilty that I have eaten and eaten fast and so forth, and he's eating so I lost control. I couldn't, couldn't hack it anymore. Because it's a passive way of relating. Passivity is a power. You see, you can be actively engaged in power struggle or passively engaged in power struggle. You know, the person who doesn't do anything has enormous power, right? It drives you up the wall, makes you angry, makes you upset, makes you call them names, do all kinds of things. And he said, I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting here. Okay. But exactly because the person is sitting there is causing all of these difficulties. So people can use the dynamics of power struggle in different ways. And decisions are made in different ways. In many times in our lives, we make decisions that are seemingly are not decisions. You know, somebody says, what do you want to do today? And so I don't know. You see, that, or you make the decision. But by doing that, you, of course, are controlling the other person. You see, because the other person, whatever decision that the other person makes, you can go against it. So, let's go to this movie. You go to this movie and then says, I didn't like it. Doesn't matter which movie the person have chosen, you wouldn't have liked it. Okay? So many a times we make decisions, consciously or not so consciously, make decisions that they have their objectives to win in the battle of wills vis-a-vis the other person, or to show our anger to that person or resentment towards that person by just simply being passive. So you can do it both ways, by being active and abusive or by being passive and abusive. In both ways works. But these two types of decision making, power-based decision making and competition-based decision making, are together are the most popular forms of decision making in human societies. Okay? These are the most popular type. Now, I was very interested in studying this type of decision making because as a psychiatrist, I saw people would come to me and usually people talk about decisions that they have made there in their lives and so forth. And I was seeing all of these varieties of decision making that are either based on power struggle or on control of other people and so forth. I was very interested to see how you can remedy this situation. What is the third type of decision making? And of course, the third type of perspective about this life and worldview about this life is the type in which we transcend the issue of power and the issue of power struggle and replace power and power struggle, power seeking and power struggle with a totally new approach to relationships. And that new approach to relationship is how can I make decisions that are conducive to harmony and unity with the other person. If I am a power-oriented person, I ask myself, how can I make decisions so that I can control the other person? If I am oriented toward power struggle, then I would ask myself, how can I make decisions that I can win in my relationship? However, if I have a perspective about life, that the fundamental law of life is not power and is not power struggle, but actually is unity. The fundamental law of life is unity. Then I also always ask myself, I have to ask myself, is this decision that I am making conducive to creating unity, harmony? If it is not conducive to that, if it's not going to create harmony, if it's going to create division, it's going to make me to win, but we are now further from each other, or is going to make me to be in control, but it has huge price that we pay in this relationship. We have to ask ourselves, am I doing that? Because if I'm doing that, I may temporarily win the battle. But on a long term, I lose the whole process of relationship. You see? So one of the three components of decision making is the worldview that we have, the perspective that we have. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of a perspective, what kind of a worldview I have in my life? Am I power-oriented? Am I competition, winning-oriented? Or am I oriented toward creating unity? These are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. And when we are making a decision, we have to say, okay, from which perspective I am making a decision. Okay. Because from whatever perspective you make that decision, the outcome is going to be different. The outcome is going to be fundamentally different. Now, the second component of decision making, the first one was your perspective. The second component related to the first component, already basically I've talked about it, is that every decision has a purpose. We always have a purpose in mind for decisions. And I just described it. You see, is your purpose to have power and control the other person? Is your purpose to become servant of the other person and obedient to the other person? Is your purpose to become much more competitive in the arena of relationship? Or is your purpose is to create unity? So you always have to ask yourself, not only what is your perspective, but what is your purpose? Okay? The third thing is a little bit more tricky. The first two P's of conflict of decision making is what is the purpose and what is the perspective. The third one is what are the moral, ethical principles that inform your decision. You see, every decision is based on some kind of a moral, ethical principle. Why? Because human beings by very nature are moral beings. In other words, we all want to be good. We all want to be perceived as being good. We all want that other people say, she is a good person, okay? And we always want to find a lot of reasons why we are doing something, because we want to justify that our decision was a good decision, you know? And when finally people show us and say, look, this was a lousy decision, then we say, well, it was an honest mistake. Okay? Most of the time, however, honest mistakes are not honest. Okay? They are dishonest. Well, many times we make decisions that morally, ethically are flawed. There are problems with it. But we find a way of making ourselves, convincing ourselves that we did it for the right reason. And because human capacity for self-delusion is infinite, we always find this all kind of reasons why we made that decision. Always. So we always can try to fool ourselves, except that we cannot fool ourselves. Because deep down, we know why we are making a decision. So the principles by which we make decisions is very, very important. Okay? And these principles, there are several principles are usually working in decision making. At the lowest level of decision making, like a child, infant, and children. As far as children is concerned, their perspective in the world, about the world, is that they say the world is me. Because children don't separate themselves from the world, right? World and them are one. And their purpose in life is to preserve themselves, because children feel very weak, they feel very vulnerable, and they have to be secure. They have to be taken care of. Okay, and therefore their moral principle is self-interest. So for children, this is normal and this is healthy. But if you have a 50-year-old that still goes around and says, world is me, okay, and I am doing everything to preserve myself, okay, and I do it in the interest of myself, then you have a problem. How many countries function that way? Listen to the politicians. We are making our country secure, right? We are looking after number one. Who is number one? Us. We are the world, okay? We are the best in the world. It's constantly that decisions are making that way. The second level of decision making, which already I mentioned to you, is when we say the world is dangerous. And of course, in this dangerous world, again, we have to protect ourselves. But here, you do it through the process of power. And what is the main moral, ethical standard of power relationship? Might is right. In other words, the person who has the power is always right. That's why the dictators, the dictators say, today the sun is out, and so, oh, today is cloudy. And the people who are standing there, they say, yes, Your Honor, it's cloudy. You see, because they're frightened, because if they say otherwise, they would be killed. Might is right. And throughout history, dictators, that's the way that they have been functioned. And dictators could be in the families, could be in schools, could be in churches, could be in places of work, could be in gangs, in the communities, could be in governments, could be everywhere. Yes. Then the third level of decision making is the one that we talked about, the world is a jungle. And the purpose is to win. And the standards, of course, the principles, is survival of the fittest. Capitalism is a good example of it. Capitalism is the ultimate example of justifying all activities, all extremes of wealth and poverty, all things that people do to make money. Look what's happening to our world. Look what has happened during the last number of years in our world. These are all have been justified on the basis of certain moral, ethical principles. And moral, ethical principles is that this life is a jungle and is the survival of the fittest, and therefore you can do anything. The final, level 4 of decision making, is when we finally say that we don't say that the world is me. We don't say the world is dangerous. We don't say world is a jungle. We say world is one. This is one world. As Baha'u'llah says, the earth is but one country. The earth is but one country. And mankind, its citizens. This is the level 4 of decision making. When we look at the world, we realize the world is one. And the fundamental purpose of decision making is to create unity. Why unity is important? Because unity is the prerequisite for peace. It's impossible to create peaceful world, a peaceful family, a peaceful school, a peaceful place of work, peaceful community, peaceful nation, peaceful world. It's impossible to create peace at any level unless we create unity. And therefore we have to learn the ways of unity. We have to learn how to be unifiers. And in order to create unity, two moral ethical principles are essential. One is that we have to make decisions on the basis of truth, not falsehood. You have to have facts. You have to search for truth. We shouldn't make decisions based on no knowledge or half-baked knowledge about something. We have to make every effort to find what is the truth underlying the situation that we want to make decision about. Therefore, it's not, for Baha'is in the audience here, as you know, one of the fundamental principles of the Baha'i faith is independent investigation of truth. That means that we have to live our lives based on truth, not based on imitation, not based on dogma, not based on public opinion, not based on what the polls say, based on reality, based on truth. Truth to the extent that we can access it. And the truth always has a scientific dimension and a spiritual dimension. So one of the fundamental needs for creating unity is that relationships have to be based on truth and truthfulness. We cannot have unity if we are not truthful with each other. We cannot have unity if I'm not trustworthy, if I'm not truthful. So that's one fundamental requisite for creating unity, that decisions that we make have to be based on truth. We have to make our utmost effort to find the truth. The second, you cannot create unity unless the principle that you follow is also based on justice. You see, unjust decisions invariably create conflict. Okay? Justice is essential aspect of unity. Now, interesting thing about justice is that justice and truth are inseparable. You cannot separate justice from truth. For example, in one of the writings of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, in one of his books, The Hidden Words, he says, the best beloved of all things in my sight, in God's sight, is justice. Through it, thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others. And thou shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor, which is search of truth, right? In other words, you cannot have justice if you are prejudiced. if you accept ideas about other people that are not that you haven't investigated to see whether they're truthful or not. If you, related to this issue of justice is that you cannot engage in backbiting. Because if we engage in backbiting, then we totally destroy the foundations of trust and truthfulness and everything. So you see how decisions in order to make peace-based, peace-creating, unity-creating, harmony-creating, creative decisions. We need to make sure that our worldview is not power-based, is not based on competition and struggle, is not based on seeing this world in a dichotomy, them and us, to be able to see this world as one world of humanity, to see that humanity is one. We are all a part of one humanity. And the second component of that is that our ultimate goal in making decisions is that our decision to create harmony. Constantly add further harmony, create ever greater circles of unity. Because ultimately it is unity that is the antidote to all of the problems of the world. All the problems of the world that we have are because of conflicts and wars and violence that happens in this world. Poverty, disease, poor leadership, corruption, all of them, they emerge from the fact that humanity has lived a life of conflict until now, a conflict-based life. And the whole idea of a new ways of decision-making, mature ways of decision-making, is to move from conflict-based decision-making, power-based, conflict-based decision-making, to a unity-based decision-making. A connected issue about creating, making unity-based decision is that we have to create inner unity. Unity between our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. You see, most of the time, we think one thing, we feel another thing, we do a third thing, and we feel conflicted, you see. In order to have inner unity, we need have situations in which our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are in harmony with each other. And they are in harmony with our principles, our moral, ethical principles. And our moral, ethical principles need to be universal, need to be inclusive, need to bring everybody in. So it's not surprising that when we study the Baha'i faith, for example, we see that the central teachings of the Baha'i faith, the main goal of the Baha'i faith, is to create inner peace and inner unity, interpersonal peace and interpersonal unity, global peace and global unity, and unity between humanity and the world of nature, unity between humanity and God. Right now, we are disunited with all of them. We are not united inside ourselves. We are not united with each other. We are at war with the nature, and we are at war with God. That's it. We are in total state of war. And we see it everywhere. We see it everything. And the whole purpose of Baha'i faith is that we have to actually begin to think differently, feel differently, act differently, make decisions differently. This is what we need to do. And this is what we need to do not because the Baha'i faith says so or Baha'u'llah says so. It's because it is the natural outcome of maturation of humanity. You see, humanity collectively has been going through different stages of development of consciousness. And we at one time have been collectively in level of infancy. At another time, in level of childhood. Childhood is when authoritarian systems take place, dictatorial systems. Now we are in collective adolescent stage. We, the whole world of humanity, is in its adolescence. What happens in adolescence? You have to grow up. You have to grow up and go to the next phase. So the whole idea of a new way of decision making, a decision making that is based on the concept that the world is one, that the ultimate purpose of all decisions is to create unity and peace. That in order to do that, we have to live according to the principles of truth and justice. These are essential requirements of maturation of humanity. And we are now entering in that phase. I think we are one of the luckiest generations in human history because we are the ones that have the opportunity to make this movement from collective adolescence and authoritarian ways of thinking and childhood ways of thinking to a mature way of thinking and mature way of decision making. We are in that time of transition. And in one of the most exciting times, if we really think about it, we have been given this gift of this opportunity of collective transition from one way of decision making, the old way, the childhood and adolescent ways, to an adult way. And the whole notion of Baha'i consultation is an instrument for that kind of a collective decision making and even individual decision making, which I hope to talk about at some other time. But we stop here. But before we stop, I just read a couple of quotations from the writings of the Baha'i faith so that you see how these ideas were based on what it was. And also, there is before I read about Baha'i decisions, Baha'i quotations, Isaac Asimov, you know who is Isaac Asimov, he says, no sensible decision can be made any longer without taking into account not only the world as it is, but the world as it will be. And that's the point. We have to make decisions, not only because our world the way that it is, but the way that the world is going to be. Because the world is changing. The world is moving toward its collective maturation. And we have to become aware of that process. We have to become aware of where we are going so that our decisions would be in harmony with that. Abdul Baha says, in this cause, in the Baha'i faith, consultation is of vital importance. But spiritual conference, in other words, decision making in this condition of spirituality, okay? But spiritual conference are not the mere voicing of personal views is intended. Then he says, in France, I was present at the session of the Senate, but the experience was not impressive. Parliamentary procedure should have for its object the attainment of the light of truth upon questions presented and not furnish a battleground for opposition and self-opinion. We see it now in other places all over the world, don't we? Antagonism and contradiction are unfortunate and always destructive to truth. In the parliamentary meeting mentioned in France, interactions and useless quibbling were frequent. The result mostly confusion and turmoil. Even in one instance, a physical encounter took place between two members. It was not consultation, but comedy. Okay? So that's Abdul Baha, in 1912 in Paris. Went and, they said, come and see, the finest fruit of human mind in administration of human affairs. And what he sees is a comedy. Okay? So the whole, I hope that I have been able to present some idea about how we make decisions and why we make decisions and how we could make good decisions. Please, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, please.
Can you maybe quickly tell us your thoughts about gut feelings and its role in the
About what?
Having a gut feeling?
A gut feeling, yes. Well, when you want to make a decision, or when I want to make a decision, okay, I realize that the several issues come in. One is that I feel something within myself, which could be, usually people call it a gut feelings, which could be one of the two possible things. Either a strong emotional urge or an intuitive feeling. Gut feeling can be mistaken, one or the other. You see, it could be one or the other. Sometimes we say, I felt it in my guts, meaning I had such strong emotions that I made decisions based on that, okay? But sometimes it's not that, it's an intuition. Now, intuition is a very, very, I think, crucial issue, because intuition is connection with the subconscious at the one level and with the higher level of consciousness at another level. Okay? In other words, when we have an intuitive feelings, we should be very responsive to it, and we should not discard it right away. So I have learned over the years that if I act right away with response to certain gut feelings, if they are based on emotions, I will be sorry later. And other times I have learned that that because I didn't respond to my intuitive feelings, that I made the wrong decision, that I should have gone that direction. So because of that, I think we should approach decision making with a very deliberate, systematic approach. And we should think about our decision. We should pay attention to our emotions, to our intuitive feelings. I always, with major decisions, make sure that if I can, to make a prayer, to pray, to ask for guidance. If decision is not urgent, postpone it so that you can think more about it. If we make decisions very fast without paying attention to the emotional, to the intuitive, to the different issues that are involved, usually we feel bad about it, you know. And so it is important to reflect, it is important to pray, it is important to pay attention to that. And usually it is important to talk it over with somebody. That's consultation. Because when you begin to talk about your decision with somebody, your thoughts become much more clear. Because when you want to verbalize your thoughts, your feelings, and your reasons and your principles for a certain decision that you want to make, and the pitfalls and this and that, then because you have to verbalize them, you have to think about them, you see. And also the other person is going to ask you questions. So it makes it much better when you do that. I have found that if I miss any of these elements, usually I come out sorrowful because usually it's not as good a decision as it could have been. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes.
What about the effect of meditation on the brain in terms of you're in the world and making decisions? And the reports are that meditation.
That's right. That's right. Meditation and prayers are both extremely important. Okay. Meditation is a process in which we ask our own soul for questions through the intermediary of our brain. So we begin to go deep and deep into our own understanding, our own experiences, on our knowledge, the things that we have learned in life, but it's not in our consciousness. When you meditate, those things come up, you see. But also when you meditate, you begin to think of bigger things beyond ourselves. So yes, meditation is extremely important. Meditation also calms us down. And because meditation brings a level of calmness, in calmness we can make decisions much better than when we are in a state of anxiety and tension. Is that what you meant? Yes. Yes, I fully agree. So meditation, prayer, discussion and consultation, postponement of the decision if it's not urgent, study, reflecting on it later, and so forth. All of these are good things for making the right decisions. A good example of that, for example, in the Baha'i faith, is that when you want to get married, you see, you have, okay, because you fall in love, you're stupid, okay? when we fall in love, you're stupid, okay? We just, nothing makes sense to us, okay? Because we are in love. And so in Baha'i writings, they say, okay, you have fallen in love, that's marvelous, that's good, because when we fall in love, we regress, we go to earlier stages of emotional maturity, we make, our own language, and we have cute names for each other, and we speak baby talk, and we do all of these things because we have gone downward, okay? But it's a good one. It's a very nice one, okay? So because of that, one of the reasons is that in the Baha'i faith, when you want to marry, you choose the person, you fall in love, you fall in love, you go into that process. But the ultimate decision has to be based on consultation with your parents. Doesn't matter how old you are. Because you want to get an objective input and also make a decision that is conducive to unity between all parties involved. And you cannot exclude your family, your parents. Because husbands and wives can divorce with each other, from each other, but parents and children cannot divorce each other. You're always connected, you see. So that's very, very important. Any other comments or thoughts? Yes?
Just concerned about the media today and the dumbing down of society, the masses watch. Is there a way that we can get more the unity consciousness into the media? It's beginning in the schools, but I don't see it in the media.
Well, the media right now, the way it's formulated and practiced, is actually is totally based on conflict. Totally based on conflict. You see, all areas of media is conflict-based. News are about conflicts. Entertainment is about conflict. Everything that we have vis-a-vis media is conflict-based. The same is about politics. Politics are also, right now, the multi-party adversarial democracy. Actually, it has the name. It's all about conflict, okay? It's totally conflict, okay? The systems that we have created, these are the finest fruits of the adolescent mind of humanity, okay? And what is happening now is that they are proving themselves more and more inadequate, okay? During the 20th century, two things began to develop at a very profound level. One was communism, and the other one was adversarial democratic system and capitalism, okay? Communism was basically a new version of power-based, control-based mindset, okay, authoritarian. And the era of authoritarian has passed, so it collapsed, okay. Now, capitalism and multi-party adversarial democracy is in a state of crisis, okay? We see it in the United States, for example, about their election of their elections, for example. But we see it all over the world, okay? And these are the conditions that are getting worse every day. I don't think either the politicians or the media moguls are going to listen to the call for unity, for harmony, they're not. But they are going to the extremes, and they would self-destruct. This is a process of self-destruction. is going to bring considerable pain to humanity unless suddenly a wake-up process comes and we say we better not to, you see. And this is not far-fetched because, for example, Cold War reached to the point of very dangerous situation. And then suddenly masses of people raise their voices and say, no. And I have a feeling the same thing is going to happen. Parents, teachers, masses are going to raise their voices and say, this is not what we want. Okay? This is, I think, is going to happen. The same thing that happened with the, for example, women movement. Okay? I think it's going to happen vis-a-vis political and media approach to issue of conflict and adversarial relationships. I think this is what's going to happen. Thank you very much, dear friends.